Retirement savings aren't always easy to see, but that might be about to change. This is Behind the Button. Welcome to Behind the Button, the podcast that really lifts the lid on what goes on behind the scenes in the world of pay. I'm Laura Murphy, the CIPP's content editor, and today we're exploring the game-changing world of pensions dashboards. Whether you're already thinking about, engaging with, or looking to the future, this could potentially change the way you think about your retirement savings. I'm joined today by the fantastic Richard Smith to talk about pensions dashboards. Welcome to the show, Richard.
Thanks, Laura. Very humbled to be invited.
So, here on Behind the Button, I know you've watched the show, so you know the drill. We ask our guests to leave a parting question for the next guest. And your one is perfect for you, I've got to say. So, we know that pensions are shown sort of in the deduction side of a pay slip alongside things like tax. But why are they framed in almost this negative light when really they're an investment for the future?
Wow, what a fantastic question. I don't know whether you've ever heard of this notion. Of course, people have different working patterns, but take a standard working week, a Monday to Friday, for example. You could think of Monday to Thursday, you're working and earning money to pay for your life today. So to pay your rent or your mortgage and your bills and pay food and maybe have a bit of fun. But Friday you could think of as earning money for the future. And we could maybe call that pension. And the really exciting thing for me is, I don't know, let's take a number. If you earned, say, I don't know, 120 quid net pay for that Friday, the government says, well done, Richard, for doing that. We're not going to charge you tax on that, so we're going to put in an extra 30 quid. And then your employer, by law, has to put at least another 90 quid on top. So 240 quid has gone off to the pension provider for 120 quid out of your net pay. So it's a fantastic thing. So I would love it. You know, on your banking app, when you get paid, you get a little alert and you say, great, thank heavens I've been paid. I would love it if your pension app also said, look, we've received another 240 quid, but it only cost you 120. Wouldn't that be fantastic if we could change the world like that?
That would be wonderful. And I think on this show, we see a lot about changing the narrative of things. Yeah. So I definitely think pensions could benefit from that. And we look at it as sort of like that investment for the future as opposed to sort of a deduction.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Richard, before we sort of get into the bulk of today's questions, talk to me a little bit about what it is that you do.
So I'm Richard Smith, a career pensions professional. So I'm from the pensions world, which I sort of see as a sister world to payroll, maybe even twin sisters, or even really co-joined twins, very, very close worlds. I really started out as a pensions administrator. For any of your audience who are in the Berkshire area, they may know that back in the day in the 1980s, there was a huge employer in Reading called the Prudential, or the Pru. It's called M&G today. But many school and college leavers in the 1980s and 90s started their pensions careers at the Pru in Reading. I think at its height in 1990, there were 7,000 people working for Prudential in Reading. So many people met their life partners there, and I was no exception. I met Heather, my wife, there. I subsequently left and became a specialist pensions management consultant at PricewaterhouseCoopers or PwC. But then in the latter part of my career, I've been doing contracting, working for different organisations on this topic of pensions dashboard. So I was lucky enough to be on the government's programme and led the team that defined the data standards for pensions dashboards, which we'll maybe talk about. But I also supported Pensions UK, which is a big trade body in the pensions world, and Pension Fusion, which is a big data provider, and also Money Hub, which is a front-end fintech app. So done various things. But right now, I'm completely independent and sort of virtually full-time pro bono. So what I'm trying to do is podcasts like this, and trying to educate and help industry, both payroll and pensions, understand what dashboards could mean when dashboards are launched.
So a long and varied career there, Richard.
Yeah.
I do want to take it back a little bit and go back to your time at Prudential, where you mentioned you met your wife, Heather. So I know that you entered into the pension world before most people, are. So if you're comfortable, would you be happy to talk to me about that and sort of why that sparked your passion in pensions?
Yeah, for sure. I don't know about sparked, but maybe sort of reinvigorated or supported what was already there. So a lot of people start work in pensions, but maybe don't feel it personally, because retirement or receiving a pension is some way off. It's something that happens in your later life. But our family story, yeah, I was incredibly lucky. Heather Wood, as she was, obviously Heather Smith after we married, she was fantastic. So really clever and funny and gorgeous, and I got lucky, frankly. And we were blessed with 3 children born in 1998, 2000 and 2002, so all around the turn of the millennium. But sadly, when our youngest Adam was 1 year old, Heather was diagnosed with breast cancer. She did really well. She had chemotherapy for 10 years. And I'll say to all your audience, I say to everybody, thank you for paying your taxes, because those chemo drugs aren't cheap. But I feel so grateful that the NHS was there to keep Heather going, so she was able to rear her 3 youngsters. But sadly, it metastasized to her bones, and then she deteriorated quite quickly, and she died in June 2014. So just about 12 years ago, this coming summer. Because she had been working at the Prudential and a member of Prudential's defined benefit pension scheme, your audience may know a lot of those pension schemes provide a spouse's pension on death. So I became a pensioner, a spouse pensioner, at the pretty young age of 46. Yeah. So I sort of feel personally what it is to receive a monthly income. And the sort of slightly mind-blowing thing for me here is that, I was 46 when that started, when Heather died. My dad lived into his 90s. So this spouse's pension could be paid for 46 years, but knowing that it will be paying, and it's also inflation protected as well. So it keeps pace with prices, is a very, very powerful thing. Now, it's not a king's ransom. It covers my council tax and some other bills, but was tremendously important because I stopped work for a little while after Heather died, and I sort of had that money there when I was learning this whole new job, which was how to be a single dad. Yeah. And I think generally, of course it's generalisation, but I think a lot of dads don't really know what's going on in their household. So that was a big learning curve for me, and frankly, I'd say it's still a work in progress.
Yeah. And you said something really lovely to me about sort of the situation there, and that's every time you receive Heather's pension, you're reminded of her and the brilliant work she did to keep the family sort of together, and I think that's a really nice way of looking at pensions.
There's another angle as well. There's another pension. It's a tiny little one, but after she had Adam and she'd had the diagnosis, she stopped work, didn't go back after maternity leave number 3. But then a few years later, when she was okay, she was relatively okay. There weren't symptoms when she was having the chemotherapy, but she was a part-time teaching assistant, or TA, our local primary school. So those staff got enrolled into the local government pension scheme, or the local fund, which for us is the Berkshire Pension Fund. So I get a tiny little spouse's pension from the Berkshire Pension Fund as well. So she was very well known in the school community. She knew all the families and the kids and their siblings and everything. And before that, she was like a mummy helper on school trips and things like that. They asked her back because she was quite handy with the kids, Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. For every month now until I die, I'll get that reminder of the time. And I have this sort of notion that pensions are a bit of a fossil record of your life. Do you see what I mean? That you build them up through your life, and then you're reminded of those special times and memories as they're paid out through your later life.
Yeah. And I know, Richard, many people watching this won't necessarily be thinking about their pensions or their retirement. But, people can find themselves in situations that are very unexpected. Yeah. So what one piece of advice would you give to people right here and now?
So life assurance, I would say, is key. So, I said about this learning journey of learning how to be a single dad, and you're flailing around. I was blessed that there was a lump of money so that I could afford not, if I'd had to carry on with crazy work and do that learning as well, that would have been very, very problematical. So I had a little period of time and we did some work on the house, and then I got into contracting and started going back to work, if that makes sense. So I think it's really important, we don't know what the future holds, but having a bit of financial backstop in case of that unexpected. Particularly, I suppose we always knew that, Heather might have deteriorated and died in case she did, but we didn't know when. Mm-hmm. I think even worse are these unexpected sudden deaths. That must be horrendous.
Yeah.
A lot of arrangements, a lot of employers and pension schemes offer a sort of death in service lump sum. So become aware of that. Make sure you're fully signed up, and make sure that if that something did happen, that you would have some opportunity for a bit of money there.
Okay, so we're going to talk a bit more about pensions dashboards a little later down the line. But in terms of sort of this situation, if pensions dashboards had existed earlier, how do you think that would have changed your attitudes towards saving for retirement?
So that's a really, really good question. And a lot of this is about sort of your attitude to time, because pension saving, there's a base load. Government has said you've got to be automatically enrolled at a certain level. And that's a base load. But if you want to do more, that's a choice often. Mm-hmm. And what that really means is limiting your current day consumption, the Monday to Thursday spending, do you know what I mean? And deferring a bit more of that until later in life. Mm-hmm. Obviously, Heather hasn't had that later life, so I think one thing that would have been helpful is to have seen where my pension was headed in terms of my future, and maybe that would have helped me understand a little bit better about striking that balance between current day consumption and deferring the pay and putting it into the future.
Mm. So you're clearly super passionate about pensions, Richard. It's part of the reason we asked you onto the show, obviously. So what would you say to people who say pensions are boring?
Well, pensions are pay. Mm. Is pay boring? Do we eat food? Yes, we do. How do we buy that? We pay for it with money that very often we earn through our work. And all pensions is deferred pay. It's just you don't get it immediately. It's put away for a while and it grows through investment. And as I mentioned at the top, government and your employer double what goes in. Mm. So that's not boring. That's incredibly powerful that, you're going to double your money and it's going to grow. And particularly right now, stock markets are racing away right now. I think on average, I've got 5 defined contribution, different pension pots from the different jobs I've done. I think they've grown 16% in the last year.
Wow.
So that's really significant growth. So I think what might make it sound boring is that it's not about now.
Yeah.
It's about my later self. So this is really one thing I think that pensions dashboards do, and we'll probably come on to talk about how they can do that.
Yeah, I think you're right. We live in a very much on-demand society at the moment. You want something, you get it like that.
Yeah.
And I think we have become a little bit impatient as humans. So yeah, I think you're right. And again, it comes back to that change in the narrative around what pensions actually are. And getting people thinking about, right, there is going to be a time in my life where pensions will be important to me.
Yes.
So yeah, I think a lot of this is around changing the narrative, which I think dashboards will hopefully do. So a lot of people will see their pensions come off their payslip, but then they don't necessarily know what happens after that point. So could you give me, I know this is difficult, Richard, but quite a high level summary of what then happens to people's pensions after they've been taken from their pay?
Yeah, for sure. So I think, again, I'd make the analogy with the pay, so people quite clearly understand, you push the button, you run, is it gross to net, run payroll, and tax is deducted, and net pay comes into my bank account. Well, a similar thing, the calculation is done to calculate pension contributions and employer contributions that I mentioned. Mm-hmm. And then that amount is remitted off to the pension provider or scheme that the employer has chosen, typically the automatic enrolment pension provider or scheme. But the thing is, a lot of workers don't really even know who that provider is. And then real life happens, you go and get a new job. So employer B auto-enrolls you maybe straight away or maybe after a postponement period of up to 3 months, auto-enroll you into another pension provider. So you've got another stream of money going off to a place that you don't really know. And then over time, that happens multiple times. So those pots of money or those contributions, if it's in a defined contribution pension scheme, are then invested. And you don't have to take any action. It's an automatic process that the provider put it into a standard investment. It's called a default. If you do nothing, it'll default into a standard investment, and that's been explicitly designed either by a trustee board or the pension provider to provide a good base level of investment return over time. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, most people have got multiple pots of money building up with different providers. I saw something from the provider Money Farm just recently, a survey. They spoke to 2,000 people. 79%, so call it 84/5, didn't know what pensions they had, or certainly what it all added up to and what it might mean for them as an income in retirement. So I feel a bit professionally and personally embarrassed that we've let this happen. Only 1 in 5 people know what they've got. You know, we need to do something about that.
And I know from looking at your blog, Richard, which is very informative, that you've accumulated 9 pension pots over your time, and that's without, you know, even consciously thinking about it almost. So yeah, I do think there's this issue of lots of different pensions all in different places, and part of the problem is that people aren't aware of what they've actually got. Which brings me very nicely onto the crux of today's episode, which is pensions dashboards. So what are they, Richard? I know we've talked about pensions more broadly, but how does that translate in terms of pensions dashboards?
So we set out the problem. It's many people, the majority, probably the vast majority, don't really know what they've got. But this is really important provision to provide them an income through their later life, and it's just deferred pay really, with some investment growth and tax and employer contribution. So we've got a vast and mature and diverse pensions industry in this country. So many pension schemes and pension providers. Back in the day, I think about my dad, he had one 40-year employment, and one defined benefit pension that got paid.
Just doesn't happen anymore, does it?
But it's sort of still set up that way. Do you know what I mean? So each of my 9 providers and schemes sort of talks to me about the bit that I've got with them as if that's all I've got.
Yeah.
Are you with me?
Yeah, very segmented.
No one is really talking to me about the totality of the income that I might get. And then I might want to think about consolidating some of them, bringing some of them together, for example. So this isn't unique to the United Kingdom, by the way. So many other countries face this. If you've got a modern labour workforce who job churn, we don't have a job for life like we used to a few generations ago. So many other countries have faced this, and they've done a similar thing. So I did an independent research tour a few years ago, and I visited Belgium, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Netherlands, and they've all done this, and some other countries as well. And it's a digital way of connecting those pension records onto a very simple, user-friendly front-end interface on, for example, an app on your phone. Easy to say. When I talk to friends and family about this, because I do all the time, if I mention it at dinner parties, people don't tend to come back. But people immediately relate to it, and almost invariably they say, I need that. And when can I have it?
Yeah.
So let's have a think about the different parts, because it's really quite a complex thing to do. There needs to be a data or digital connection from all of the 3,000 pension schemes and providers in this country by an application programming interface, an API, so the digital interface, into a central government-run finder service, and that controls or orchestrates the search. So you go through a government digital login. Your audience might be aware of Government Gateway, that the successor central government ID service is going to be gov.uk One Login.
Yeah.
A number of people, it's growing. That ID service is going to be eventually for all government services. So you go through that, and then your details are passed to all those connected data providers to say, have you got a pension for Richard? So there's some complex matching going on there as well. And then those providers, my 9, for example, would all find their pension, and they return a defined set of information, which is the data standards that I helped set up for government. And those are displayed in a really simple way on a government website called Money Helper, which is part of the government's money and pension service. And that's going to be available on your phone. So that's, in essence, how it all stitches together.
Yeah, so it sounds really simple in principle, but there is a lot of work that has gone into it.
Yes.
Just because, as you say, there are such a vast number of pension providers and schemes in the UK. So I want to talk to you now about how pensions dashboards will impact pay professionals.
Right.
And I know you keep apologising to me whenever we talk about it, to payroll professionals and to employers, because pensions dashboards could potentially mean an uptick in work in
Yes.
some areas.
Yes.
So because the dashboards allow people to see their retirement income in full in one place,
Yes.
that might prompt the question of, am I doing enough? Do I need to increase my contributions?
Yes.
So talk to me about how that will impact pay professionals.
Well, I think the truth is no one knows yet, because just to say where we are on the programme, the Money Helper Pensions Dashboard, MHPD, is live now in private beta testing. And what that means is it's being used by real consumers to see their real pensions now, because the data's connected. That's the thing that's taken some time to do. So we're just in the foothills of learning what the real consumer reaction is. And headline, people love it.
Yeah.
You know, there's some really, people say, gosh, and I've witnessed some of this testing. It's very humbling. It's very emotional to see people's reaction. For the first time, I can see simply what I've got. So a list of your pensions, but then a really important point to understand, it doesn't lead with the pension pot of money, because if people see 10,000 or 50,000 pounds, they don't really know what that means to them in retirement. But if you show them, which the dashboard does, this could give you £1,000 a year, or it could give you, I don't know, £200 a month, whatever the amount is. They can relate to the income. And then you add that to their state pension, which is also shown. Most people don't know that the full rate of the new state pension is about 12,000 a year, so about £1,000 a month. So when you add all those incomes together, you then see this figure, this total estimated retirement income, total ERI. Now, the question that we don't really know, but I think you're asking me, is, well, how will people react to that?
Yeah.
And another part of government, well, Department for Work and Pensions has set up a pensions commission to look at this issue about the adequacy of retirement saving, because we think across the population, not enough money might be going in. So automatic enrolment minimum, I'm sure your audience is aware, is 8% of the band of earnings called qualifying earnings. And that may not be enough for higher earners. So when people see the outcome or the forecast outcome of that, I don't know, let's call it, £1,500 a month. Richard, you might have £1,500 a month, £1,000 a month state pension, and then £500 a month from your other pensions in 2048. And then I think, well, would that be enough to live? And I might think, I want to increase my contribution. So what I think may well happen is, even though Pensions Dashboards feels like a future thing, it feels about your retirement, no, it's actually going to create conversations with employers and their payroll teams on, well, am I putting enough in?
Yeah.
And also, a lot of generous employers have put in place employer matching, pension contribution matching arrangements.
Yeah.
So Nest Insight did some research on this a few years ago. Broadly, I think about half of employers offer these arrangements. I think about a third offer them to all their staff, and about another 17% to some of their staff. But of those half of the workforce or so who've got access to employer matching, only about 60% take it up. So for those 40% of workers, they're leaving some money on the table. Obviously, they've got to put some money in, but the employer would put more money in too. So I suspect that the visibility of what you might get out of a pension, which is the monthly income on a dashboard in aggregate, might generate conversations about saying, well, what more could I get from my employer? So I think the question I would ask to every employer and their payroll team, sorry, Laura, is how easy or how low friction is your contribution increase process if your staff want to increase their contributions? I think sometimes they can be quite complex multi-step processes and quite high friction, but I think we might see more appetite. And I think there's some new research that Standard Life are just putting out around now, when they've talked with a number of employers, and I think there is appetite from employers to recognise this. Obviously, it is a vast range of employers. There's larger employers and medium and smaller. But I think there is appetite to say, well, we want to be doing the right thing by our staff. We want to know that enough is going in for their needs. So I think even though Pensions Dashboard sounds like it's for your future, I think it could actually generate conversations in the now impacting payroll.
Yeah, and you said to me earlier, you know, it is bringing the future into now, and I
Yes.
really like that concept.
Yes.
And I know certainly at the CIPP we talk more about how pay professionals can position themselves more strategically. that matched contributions piece that you've just spoken about,
Yes.
pay professionals can go to finance and they can say, look, we know pensions dashboards are coming. That's going to mean increased visibility of retirement income. That could mean that employees then look at what they're contributing, what you offer. So finance guys, get ready for potentially more cost in this space. So yeah, I think that's a really good way of pay professionals positioning themselves in a more strategic light.
And just listening to you talk there, I think you said like more work and more cost. I would maybe spin that and say, how about more value?
Yes.
You know, this Friday, you know, my Monday to Thursday working for today, Friday, people are working for that Friday, if this little model works. But a lot of people aren't really valuing, the people who have taken up employer matching today are generally the higher paid, longer serving people who value, and obviously employers are directing that money to the people who value it. So look how employers could increase the value in the eyes of their workforce and indeed new recruits. So I think we could see the perceived value of pension or long-term saving really increasing on the back of this.
I really hope so. And you're right, employers are always looking for ways that they can reward their staff more effectively.
Yes.
With pensions dashboards, maybe pensions will become sort of a more popular reward of choice.
Yes, there's one thing as well I'm thinking is some employers might even want to embed the Money Helper pension dashboard within their staff portals. Do you know what I mean? So yes, come and have a look at what your current pension is, but then see what else you've got in your career to date, because then you can see it in totality. And I heard an aspirational vision the other day. Imagine putting it right upstream in payroll. So when you get your payslip each month, yes, here's another 120 quid has gone off to the pension provider, and also another 120 from employer and tax relief. And here how your total pension income has grown. So imagine if you could actually see your pension growing up every month throughout your whole working life. That would be tremendous. Maybe that's an aspiration.
No, but again, that's another visibility thing, Richard.
Yes,
It's conversations like these that spur things like that on. So yeah, I think that would be really, really helpful for people to see. So again, I think this is going to be a difficult question for you, Richard. What's the one most exciting thing about pensions dashboards for you?
So, yes, there's a lot. Well, I think it's this one number. So you remember I mentioned the continental research tour I did of the countries who've had dashboards for ages. They've all iterated and settled on a design that works. And without exception, the homepage for all of them have this one number. Total estimated retirement income, a total ERI. So I think when people see that number, that is going to be the first time they've really got a sense of what might I get each month in the future. And it's discounted back, so it's in today's money. So it's if you included inflation, it would look like a big number, like a telephone number. Do you know what I mean? Because of future inflation, but it's discounted back, so you can relate to it in today's money, if that makes sense. So I think when people see that is the moment of truth. I talked to Copilot the other day and I said, what do you call this? And it came up with the ASM. It called it the adequacy salience moment. That's a bit Copilot-y, isn't it? But I think there's 3 T's there. I think there's the truth of what you might get, and which is a fact that people are seeing for the first time, but they didn't know. Many people, 80% don't know. There's a real trigger. It's an emotional, that's the salience. Oh, how do I feel about that? And then there's time. Then there's a moment to help people feel encouraged to say, you're doing okay. You might want to nudge up your contributions to make it the total income go north.
So you mentioned earlier, Richard, when you speak to people, they say, when can I get my hands on this? So I know you don't have the definitive answer, but when do we think that pensions dashboards could potentially be fully realised and available to the general public?
Yeah, it's the question everybody wants to ask. So I think with major technology ecosystems, it's dangerous sometimes to set a particular date, because you don't be working to a date. I think everybody would agree we wouldn't want it launched until it's safe and secure, because this is people's personal data. So just to set out the parameters of how it might play out. So as I mentioned, we're in live private beta testing right now, and then the Money and Pension Service have published a testing timeline talking how the numbers of testers will grow over time through the summer and autumn of 2026. And it may spill into 2027. It all depends on how well the testing goes. And there are 2 broad themes to that testing. There's the technological testing, the technology ecosystem. Do those application programming interfaces work? Does that make sense? So technologically, does it work, and is it safe and secure? But then there's consumer understanding. So does the front end of people understanding what they're seeing, and what are they feeling and thinking and doing when they see that number and see their pensions? So that testing is going on. Now, ministers have said when the testing has proven we've got to a level where it works and consumers understand it, they will then give a 6-month notice period before a public launch. So this isn't official, it's just Richard's idea. But just as an example, if that notice was made, say, Easter 2027, then we might see an autumn 2027 public launch, for example. But it all depends on how well the testing goes. It could be sooner, could be later. But what I'm saying to all pensions and payroll industry professionals is be aware of what's coming. There are information and tools out there about what the dashboard journey looks like and feels like, and more people are going to get involved in testing. So we need to prepare as a payroll and pensions industry so that we're ready when lots of people use this. And the stats, just to say, from other countries, broadly 40 to 50% of the working age population in these countries use these dashboards at least once a year. So in this country, we've got 40 million working age adults. So over time, we might get to 20 million people using the dashboard at least once. Some people use it many times a year, but at least 20 million could use it once a year.
Yeah, I think you mentioned a key phrase for pay professionals there is prepare.
Yeah.
We have to prepare for all of the changes that are coming down the line, because getting pay accurate is so important. We need to make sure we fully understand things and implement them properly, and this is no different.
I think that pay increase process, understand how easy is it to increase contributions, that's something that could happen now, an analysis review of that.
Yeah, and I know, Richard, you've done some articles for me in our membership magazine, getting pay professionals prepared for this, and I know you're going to do a future article for me as well, because I think that is really, really important. So that's looking forward to the future of dashboards, but this has been a very, very long sort of process. I believe there was quite a prominent article about it even back in 2014 in the Times, and I know that date holds profound significance for you. Yeah,
it was Financial Times actually, yes. So the concept isn't new, ever since we've been moving jobs and we're no longer my dad. This need has been there. In fact, the oldest dashboard is the Danish one that was launched 26 years ago.
Wow.
So in fact, the previous Labour government around 2002 started doing this concept and building. It was called an online retirement planner in those days. But then state pension changed, so they paused or mothballed that programme. But then something called Pension Freedoms came along in 2014, which is you don't have to purchase an annuity with your pot of money. And auto-enrolment came along. So suddenly there were lots more pensions with lots more opportunities about how to use those pension funds in retirement. So the Financial Conduct Authority said we really need to look at that thing again. So yes, that came out in 2014, and this report, that first media report on this iteration of the project or of the initiative, actually happened to be Heather's funeral. So I knew, because I'd been involved with government in helping the rollout of automatic enrolment, I knew it would be a long policy development. So I set up this blog really for myself of links to all the updates from government and different trade bodies so I could see and refer back to. I did it for me, but people say it's quite useful. And now it's a repository over the last 12 years of 700 links of all the thing that's gone on. And it just shows the complexity of connecting all this data. And remember, this is data that's decades old. My first pension started building up in the 1980s. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't know there are many other industries where you're dealing with data that is that old. So it's a really, really complex thing to do. And I would say the UK pensions industry is about 10 times the size and complexity of any other country that's, in terms of pension records, that's done a dashboard.
Yeah.
Also, we have generally lower state pension. A lot of other countries have a higher, it's called Pillar 1 state pension. And it's quite interesting. The Dutch team said to me in The Hague when I visited them, they said, Richard, the Dutch dashboard has generally been showing people they're going to be okay in retirement. Your dashboard might show a lot of people that they're not going to be okay in retirement, because we know that 8% contributions may not be enough, which is why I do feel it's going to generate these conversations with employers. Just
on your blog, Richard, it is very, very useful and informative. There's lots of videos on there. I certainly found a lot of useful information on there, so people should go and check that out. So do you think pensions dashboards will bridge sort of the savings gap for younger people? Do you think it'll get more younger people thinking about saving for their retirement?
I hope so. Again, I sort of answer every question. We don't know. We need to test it. So amongst all, what I love about the money and pensions testing regime is they're testing with a whole range of consumers, not just by age and gender, but all sorts of other parameters as well. I tell the story about my daughter. She's on her second job now, and she's got a pension from the first job with Legal & General. She got the annual statement, in paper.
Yeah.
She looked at it for 30 seconds, ripped it up, put it in the bin. I retrieved it from the bin, and I said, "Oh, Catherine," she said, "Yeah, I looked at it. I've got $9,000 in there." I thought, "Oh, great. That's her pot of money." I said, "Did you turn it over and looked at what your projected income could be, which was £78 a month from 2066? And she said, "No, I didn't even know there was a page 2.
Yeah.
Right. But then I said, "Oh, on a dashboard, you wouldn't lead with the dashboard isn't going to show the ninth. Well, it will show the £9,000, but it's a few clicks in. Do you know what I mean? What it'll lead with is £1,000 a month state pension, and then £78 a month L&G pension. And then when you start your second job, then they'll start adding on to it." Do you see what I mean? So by reframing this as what you might get when you are older, it is quite different from what we do today. What we do today in pensions is show people their pot. But the research shows that a lot of people don't really know what that value means to them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So part of what I'm doing is talking at conferences and saying, we're sort of changing the dynamic on this. It's a bit of a challenge for my industry and the pension industry because the pot is a bigger number. Catherine likes seeing 9,000.
Yeah.
£78 a month didn't feel so much. But what I would say to Catherine, and what the comms and videos and everything need to do, is that is £78 a month inflation proofed through your retirement until you die. So that's a very powerful thing. And this is the point that I've experienced with my spouse's pension. At 46, I learnt what it is to receive a pension income. And it's a very, very powerful thing. So hopefully, but we wait to see the testing.
Well, I think it's so important because we know that if you start saving into your pension earlier on, it increases the value of your pension. I wanted to say pension pot then, but I'm scared of saying that now. But it increases the value of your retirement income exponentially.
Yes, and here's another thing. I think I've seen research that has talked to particularly females who more still typically have the longer parental leave if they have children, and maybe have some time out of the workplace if they're going to having multiple children, like Heather did. And then they're told, well, really, you could have put in more in your 20s, and that would have been growing during that period of time you're out of the workforce. Why wasn't I told that? Yeah. So what I'm really hopeful is that youngsters in their 20s and 30s, perhaps before parental leave, really begin to understand this more and more. And this again leads to what I call upstream conversations at the employer with their boss and with their HR and payroll systems. But I think we'll have to talk about it as greater value for the workforce, because I think it will be more work and more cost for HR and payroll. So sorry.
So you touched upon there something really interesting. We know there's a gender pay gap more generally, but there's also a gender pensions gap.
Yes.
So hopefully the dashboards will help with that.
There's some research by the SEI Master Trust done by Ignition House. I love this. The group that is most looking forward, at my dinner party, everybody wants it, but the group that most wants to look at dashboard is Gen X females.
Okay.
Generally, the interest increases through age, because I can tell you from experience, being 58, it gets more and more interesting when you're getting within shouting distance of getting the money.
Yeah.
You with me?
Yeah.
But that's not to say 20 and 30-somethings aren't interested too, but interest increases with age. So Gen X's, like me, are aged currently 45 to 60. So sort of Kemi Badenoch to Liz Hurley. That's the age gap. Age 45 to 60. And a lot of those Gen X females want to get on top of this. So I'm really excited how visibility also helps with that gender pension gap. Now, for some of those Gen X females, they may not see the total estimated retirement income they want, but then there's a chance to do something about it.
Yeah.
Step one is show me what I've got. Then I can look at options about, okay, what can I do about it? It's very exciting. I don't think I could be involved in another aspect of policy that's got more social impact across more millions of people for decades to come. It's really, it's quite profound.
And it impacts everybody. You don't
it's
have
universal.
to have
Unless we die young, like Heather, which most of us won't, we're all going to need some sort of support in retirement, and we call it pension.
Yeah.
But we don't show people how it's building up through their life, but soon we will.
Yeah. And I think, you don't have to be a pay or pensions professional to have an interest in this. As you said, it impacts most of us.
Can I say one more exciting thing? I know I was supposed to talk about the most exciting thing, but I said to Anders Lundström, who's the chief exec of the Swedish dashboard, Min Pension in Stockholm, I said, what are Swedes asking for now? Their dashboard's quite mature. And he said, they want to see the environmental, social and governance, the ESG aspects of all their pensions. So when you can see your 3 pensions listed, you say, well, which one's best? And I say, well, what do you mean by best? Do you mean the ones that are invested in oil and gas, or the ones that are invested in offshore wind? So there's actually a planet and climate aspect to this as well. And I think probably there's only one issue, is probably planet. And the most impact you can have is making sure you're invested in the companies who've got sustainability at their heart. So it's actually, because pensions sort of own all the corporates of the world, and this is the visibility. I'm sort of talking version 2 dashboards now.
Yeah.
But you're with me?
We haven't got pensions version 1 yet, Richard.
Right, yeah.
So, I think if anybody is interested in learning more about the dashboards, what advice would you give to them, Richard? So
the government programme is called the Pensions Dashboards Programme, and that's their website, pensionsdashboardsprogramme.org.uk. And that is a programme set up by an arm's length body, which is called Money and Pension Service, or MAPS, and that's an arm's length body of the Department for Work and Pensions. So it's a government programme, but plugging in at the bottom is my industry's data. And where does my industry get its data? From your industry. So you see what the stream is. But a good place to start would be the Pensions Dashboards Programme. And then my blog is dashboardideas.co.uk, and it's just a repository of information, trying to, as I say, to educate industries to understand what it's going to mean. And on your blog, Richard, I noticed something. Erica. Yes. Can you talk to me a little bit about what Erica is? This moment. I talked about the adequacy salience moment, the moment you see your total estimated retirement income. So I was thinking over Christmas. So we have this pensions commission looking at adequacy at societal level. But adequacy is actually very personal. I see my total ERI, about what I could get in the future. Is that enough for me? And that's very personal. And the example I give there is benchmarks or standards. There's something called the Retirement Living Standards from Pensions UK. They have to necessarily be sort of standard for everybody, but everybody's spending is different. I happen to have given up flying, and I've given up driving, so I don't have any motor costs, car costs or flying costs, but the RLS, the Retirement Living Standards, assumes that you'll have X holidays and Y replacement cars, etc. So spending is very personal. So I think what I'd like to see is a sort of consumer norm where when we see that total ERI, and as I said, most people on the continent probably go on there once or twice a year, but just a bit of a check-in in my mind to say, is that total income, is that looking like it's going to be enough adequate for me? So Erica is an estimated retirement income check for adequacy. And I thought about what else do we check regularly? Well, it's our car. The MOT test. You know the sign for the MOT test? It's like 3 triangles. Your audience may be able to picture the logo. I asked Wikipedia, why has it got 3 signs? When MOT test started in 1960, they only tested 3 things. And that's why there's 3 triangles. They tested your lights, your steering and your brakes. And so that's testing visibility. Can you see? Steering, are you in charge of the direction? And brakes, are you in charge of how fast you're going? So I think the same 3 things would apply to an Erica check. It's a lot of sort of consumer habit. Once a year, visibility, can I see where I'm going? So log on to the Money Helper dashboard and see what my total estimated retirement income is. Direction, do I know what I'm aiming for? And the very exciting thing there is with open banking technology, you can get a lot of banks now categorize your spending to tell you what you spend now. So mine, for example, would say, well, you don't spend anything on cars. Do you know what I mean? So look at what you spend now, and then maybe you take away your mortgage because that would hopefully be paid off by then, or we can see you're paying rent, so we think you're going to continue paying rent. So that's what I need. That's the adequacy. And then the speed is how fast am I going to get to my target income? That's, do I want to pay more contributions? Or with open finance technology, a lot of people have got other stuff. A lot of people have saved into ISAs, or they may have a rental property or various other assets. And a lot of retired people today are living off those assets as well as their pension. So we actually need to go bigger than just pension and go to other assets. But let's start with pension.
Yeah.
But I think joining together pensions dashboards data with open banking and open finance is an incredibly powerful cocktail.
Gosh, there's so many exciting,
It
different
is.
moving plates.
Yeah. What a time to be alive.
Yeah. And this might be a silly question, Richard, but just in case anyone's
No silly
wondering.
questions.
The pensions dashboard. So obviously, as you go through your employment, you're hopefully saving more into your pension pot. Sorry, I said it.
You save into a pot, but you get an income.
Yeah. So the pensions dashboard, will that update in real time so that people can see what they've got?
So the way
now?
it works is no data is in the dashboard. It's a pull service. So only if you, Laura, went to the Money Helper dashboard, went through the government ID service and requested your pensions to be found, would that data be retrieved.
Okay.
So there's no central database of everybody's pensions, if I can put it that way. And then when you log off that dashboard, there's no data persistency in the ecosystem. It stays with the providers. So I think the question you're asking is, how recent will the data be when you do that search and you do that data retrieval? Some providers are providing really up-to-date sort of, your pension fund as at last night and a projection of the income as at that pot as at last night. Some are going to be as at the last benefit statement. So you could think of it as, a lot of your audience will get multiple benefit statements, annual statements. If you put them all on your table in front of you, and you turned it over to page 2 where it does show the income, and then you added up those incomes, that plus state pension, that is sort of what a pension dashboard will do initially. But I think we'll see more and more data providers connected moving to really up-to-date data. But it's quite complex to do that forecast projection on the fly. When Laura comes and asks to see her pensions, then there's some maths to do if you're going to send a really, really up-to-date figure. But I think we'll see that happening over time.
I'm assuming the data isn't held so that there aren't any data protection sort of issues and sensitivities.
So I mentioned the ecosystem of the pension providers have connected into a central finder service that gets displayed on a front-end dashboard on the Money Helper website. So there are data protection impact assessments at each one of those layers, of course.
Yeah.
This is partly why it's taken a long time, because to do it properly takes time. And a key part of the ecosystem design is this lack of data persistency. There's no data storage, if that makes sense, throughout the ecosystem. It resides where it is today with the pension provider / scheme or their administrator. But you do take a snapshot. And that's a key point, I would say. Dashboards aren't a golden bullet to solve all pension planning and retirement issues, but it's giving a snapshot of right now of what you've got. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then I wouldn't say to anybody, go to the pensions dashboard every month, but 2 or 3 or 4 times a year, and get yourself confident and maybe nudge up contributions over time. And that's a really quite important thing to understand. Some of the continental dashboards have moved to do more. They've all iterated and got better and better because they've been launched. And so the Swedish one, for example, you can begin to actually execute a retirement. So you can, from the dashboard, say, I'd now like to bring that into payment.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's pretty, but there's nothing like that on version 1 in the UK. This is just a sort of inert display of what you've got. But that is a tremendous thing for millions of people, the 80% who don't know what they've got.
Yeah, it's a great start. And I know we joked earlier about version 2.0,
Yes.
but I'm assuming that this will be an ongoing project.
Can I get excited again? So
you
sitting
can.
next to Michael Rasch in Copenhagen, who runs the Danish dashboard, which is 26 years old, he said, he logged in as himself to show me his pensions because you need a real case, And he said, I mentioned this to my wife at breakfast. I said that you were coming over, Richard, to visit me, and he sent a message to the central ID service in Denmark that sent her a text to say, do you give permission for this individual to have temporary access to your government ID? And she's, of course, consented because she knew she was expecting it because he'd mentioned it at breakfast. So then he logged in as her as well. So then the timeline of their retirement showed the household's pensions over. I was wetting myself with excitement. He said, calm down, Richard. We've been going 26 years, right? And they all said to me, Richard, in the UK, you've been talking about this too long. I think they meant Britain rather than me personally. But they said you have to launch a basic version 1. Then you get feedback from consumers about what else they want to see. And a very, very common one is, can I see my spouses as well? Because people generally tend to retire as a partnership or spouse. unless maybe you're separating, in which case you definitely don't want that. So it has to be a very secure thing. Other things people want to see is they want beneficiaries after a death to be able to use it, and that could be a very useful thing. Do you know what I mean? So perhaps my father's parent has died, and I need to cease or find out where all the pensions are and then cease them all, for example, or in the future maybe pay some inheritance tax on them because it's coming within the inheritance tax. But unfortunately right now in version 1 it's only the extant individual who can use it, but maybe in time we'll enable beneficiaries or legal personal representatives, to be able to use it. Every time I speak about this at conferences I get a long wish list of version 2, 3, 4 enhancements, but you have to launch version 1 and then you can move towards the better thing. So the language I use is launching of dashboards in 2027 or 28 isn't the end.
Yeah.
It's the start.
Yeah.
And then it just gets better and better, as I've seen the Continental ones do.
It's something really emotive, your pension is, and what you're going to receive. So we need to make sure it's all handled correctly.
Correct. And
that people are getting the right information, because that could cause a really bad situation if somebody got incorrect information about their retirement income.
And that's partly why this testing isn't boxed into a time boxed. The testing has to be thorough, so exactly those teething issues, as you'd expect. If you connect 3,000 schemes, did I say, and between them they hold 100 million pension records. 100 million, going back to the 80s.
Yeah, it's a lot of data.
Yes, so that's why I'm not overly critical of the government taking its time on this.
Well, thank you so much for that today, Richard. Really interesting and a lot of exciting things to come.
Yeah.
So if I could ask you for one last favour, please, that would be, what is your question for our next guest on Behind the Button?
Oh, well, you've seen I'm all about the feelings and emotion. So my question for your next guest would be, tell us a few words about something you've done in payroll that's had a big emotional impact.
Great question, Richard. And thank you so much for joining us and appearing on this episode of Behind the Button.
Thank you for having me.
You know what to do. Hit subscribe or follow Behind the Button on your favourite podcast player. And if you're watching us on YouTube, tap the like button, drop us a comment and make sure you subscribe so you never miss an episode. We've got lots more great guests lined up to tell their payroll stories. And we'd love to get questions, suggestions and stories direct from you. Just email behindthebutton@cipp.org.uk. We can't wait to hear from you. Thanks for tuning in and we'll see you next time.